right, good morning, and we're back. Our hardener has been put on our little mountainside, and it's gotten good and hard, and it's had at least 8 to 12 hours to dry, maybe a little more. So my texture may be a bit rougher than yours, and that's okay. Again, that's a matter of preference. I let my last batch of mixture thicken up a bit, so I got a little more texture as I spread it. And then instead of having any brush strokes, I kind of went in and stippled it. And this is what I mean by stipling. You just kind of tap it with your brush, because I don't want mine to look like an artist painting. I want it to look like an artist sculpture. I want it to look like a rock when we're through painting and landscaping this, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So what I want to do is I want to go around and I want to flick the edges after I pull this loose from the paper or whatever surface I've been working on, and make sure there's no areas, see there's a little area come loose there, that are brittle that want to break off. I want the brittle pieces to break off now. I don't want to get a finished paint and landscape for a piece to break off the size of a quarter or $half and just ruin your piece. Now, if this is fixed to your scenery, if it's fixed and not going to move, what we just talked about, doing it on paper, all those things are not necessary. You will have fixed this to your project, and this surface will be rendered as part of your landscape. Now, if you are doing this portable, where you're doing it off to the side and going to go sit it on your layout, at this point, I'm going to be back with my wax paper before I put my paint on. Again, we're working with all latex paints, but latex will absolutely adhere this to the paper, and when you go to peel them loose, just like every other step in this process, it will break apart your hardener, and we don't want that. We want a nice, happy project, not a frustrating project that we have to redo. That doesn't mean on the first one you won't wind up redoing some things, but that's okay. All right, we're just going to start applying our paint. Again, we're going to start with a base that's going to be relevant to the rock range or mountain range or stone range or landscape range, whatever you're sculpting after. We're going to start with that base, and then we're going to bring highlights out that color the stones the way that we want them. So in this case, being from Oklahoma, I see a lot of mineral-rich, iron-rich soils, a lot of red soils that are black and gray and gumbo colors. And then I have different topography. We have sandy soils and sandy loams. So I always think in Oklahoma of a dark cocoa brown, reddish brown base. So that's what I'm going to go with for my base. Now, this is not the finished color. This will represent kind of what your eye picks up. This is the color that the depth, your eye, deep color will pick up and recognize. But the colors on top will bring out the reliefs and the high spots. And absolutely, this stone will change color 3 or 4 times as we paint it. And we bring out the dry brushing, and you'll see that in the next steps as we go along. This is a really fast process. Again, this is our latex base. And I picked my color, and this is just something that you will do from experience. You'll try a few pieces, and then you'll kind of decide, hey, I want to start with this base or that base. If I was doing the Rocky Mountains, I might have started with more of a gray, charcoal gray base. Not too dark black, but somewhere more in the blue ranges. Then that way when we go over it with lighter grays and whites, it would show more kind of the grayish cast that you see in the Rocky Mountains and up in Utah and Colorado area. And then if we were doing Smoky Mountains, we might do maybe a little more, I don't know, maybe a little more of a light tan in this. Not quite tan. Actually, on this being the Midwest here that we're trying to model, we'll hear that crunch. That's that good hardener that we put on, deflecting my brush from tearing it up. But anyway, we'll kind of discuss colors and dry brushing and pigmentation as we go along in the next few steps. So everybody, kind of figure out your base color, get it going on. Let's get this started, and let's get ready to run a train through our finished tunnel this weekend, we hope. Okay, happy modeling, happy painting. I'm going to get this one painted, and then I will see you. I'm going to put 2 coats on, let them dry, 4 to 8 hours in between, and then after that, probably tomorrow morning, I will be putting on another I'll start doing the dry brushing. Dry brushing goes very, very fast. I think you'll be really impressed at how this tunnel starts to take shape with the dry brush. Okay, see everybody next time we get together. Woohoo! Okay, so I'm back, and I have put 2 very, very nice coats of latex brown over the hardened shell, and I've allowed it to dry somewhat overnight. See how the wax paper still has a tendency to stick, but overall it turns loose very nicely. Again, if your project is stuck to the board, there's no need for the wax paper moving it around. Finish it right on the board, finish it right on your whatever. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a dapple of black, just latex black, and I'm going to mix it in my cup, and literally I'm just getting enough in there to make a mess. Alright, so there's some black. That's just black latex. And I'm going to work this like a glaze or an antiquing solution, something along that nature. I'm just going to cut it about 30%. Since this is a model railroader, we're going to seal this in the end. It really doesn't matter if we compromise the integrity of our paint, because all this is for scenery and for looks. So if you see me here, I'm really getting a liquid black paint. I'm really getting something that's going to almost be runny. So when we put it on, it's going to be like putting on more like water than paint. And that's exactly what I'm after. Now we won't know our texture until we actually just try it. So try it somewhere in a non-conspicuous place, because you don't want to be starting over on your whole project. Okay, the purpose of the black is to pick up the reliefs, pick up the cracks, the crevices, the shadows. When we look at our values in life, where there's no sun, we get a lot of dark spots. So we just quickly want to go through here and pull this in. Yeah. There we go. And there, see how thin it is? And I'm just going to start pulling in my black on my corners and my crevices. I just want to paint those in a little bit. Anywhere there's going to be a reflection of the sun, we're going to lose some sunlight and we'll get a little bit of shady area. We want that caught with just a little bit of shadowing. We don't want to go crazy, but we want to get a little bit in there. Now this spot that I'm doing right here, good chance we're going to paint it green. Just a chance. Never know. Alright. I hope you can see what I'm doing. Just going around. Let's give a little here. Let's give a little here. Let's give a little in here. So the other method you could do on your highlighting your reliefs, that seems almost double negative, doesn't it? Highlighting a relief with dark paint. The other thing you can do is you could just use a glaze, like a latex glaze, and mix it with a dark brown or a black or whatever color you want in your crevices, and just go over the whole thing and wipe it off with a rag. That's really not the technique that I'm looking for on this project, but I do that on some of my projects. Glazes are wonderful. If you know how to use a latex glaze, it can be your friend. If you know how to use an oil-based glaze, you're probably a finished professional. Yes, I've used plenty of oil-based glazes. You can see that in my furniture and custom woodwork and custom interior designs that I used to do. Too old, too brittle, but I still enjoy a nice piece of furniture. All right, here we go. So we're just picking up these highlights, just getting in there and just picking up the highlights. All right, see how this is almost a milky black, kind of turned into a gray? That's what I really like, because it's real easy to dry brush over this and make a lot of the black disappear. Okay, so after I turned the camera off, you can see I went in and really darkened up a lot of the deep spots, a lot of the cracks and corners and things that really I'd expect to pick up the values, shadow values, dark values, as you look on a stone or this mountaintop or whatever. Things are really where I really want to see some depth. I didn't pick up all of them, but you can see you can really get carried away, and all of a sudden, before you know it, I go from a brown mountain to a solid black mountain, and that's not what I wanted. I just wanted the shadowing. So even I probably I did 20 or 30% of this with shadowing, and you can already tell the perception to your eye is this is starting to look much more black than brown, but the reality is this probably has much more brown than black. Anyway, so the technique I'm going to use now, I believe that the black is very, very dry. It's been on a couple of 3 hours, and the technique I want to use now is a dry brush. It's just a physical dry brush. If you've ever heard that term, I'm going to explain it to you real quick. And this is something that takes a little bit of time. It's a little technique. It's a little learned skill. Every time you do a little, you get a little better. So you load your brush with some paint, just the very end of it, and then you literally work the paint off the end of your brush. You're trying to dry out your brush. What you're not wanting to do is you're not wanting to paint deep into crevices. You're just wanting to have enough paint on your brush, you see, that you're picking up the highlights as you gently skim your brush over your project. Now, it's best to give it a little practice run, because sometimes your brush can still be heavy, and then all of a sudden you have brush strokes instead of dry brush effect. So you take your project and you hold your brush gently. Just hold it between a couple fingers. This is not something, look at there, fugitive brush here, and that's going to really pick up. And that's okay. I'll get rid of it. So see, I already got a heavy spot of tan. This layer we're going to use like a saddle or a tan, a lighter brown, to really start coming out to grays and whites, and then we'll shadow again in blacks as we finish. So I'm going to start laying it on gently. I'm just barely introducing the brush to the project. Now, so what this does is it just lays on the high spots. And yes, this brush is big enough that you're going to get some in the crevices, and that's okay. Because we're going to go over this 5 or 6 times, and the first time we go over it, it's going to be light. The second time, it'll be a little more tan, and the third time, a little more tan, and the fourth, fifth time, it'll really start minimizing the dark brown and really start hiding the black, and the black will start popping like relief shadows. And the black we don't want to look like relief shadows will simply disappear. Okay, can we see what's happening there? Can we see me starting to pick up the veins and the transitions? And it's really a matter of technique and how I apply the paint, how much I load the brush, how much I unload the brush, how much I try to put on at one time. When you dry brush this layer, 4 to 5 layers is better than 1 heavy layer. 4 to 5 thin layers is better than 1 heavy layer. See it coming out? See the veins really popping? And see the brown and the blacks picking up the values? And that's how we do that. That's called a dry brush. Now, I'm going to have to hit this from a different direction to pick up my rock crevice, and that's okay. You hear me say that a lot. That's okay, because we are problem solvers. Let me tell you, that's what we're going to do. We're going to solve these train problems, and we're going to have a layout the whole neighborhood's going to be envious of, right? Christmas Day, the kids are all going to open their gifts and run over to our house to play with trains. That's the way we want to be. All right, here we go. That's coming in to look like a pretty good mountain to me. This is just one coat of the light caramel, light sand color paint on top of the dark brown. I'm going to go ahead and load my brush again gently. And I'm going to try to unload it as much as I can. And then again, I'm going to sample it. I think I'm still a little bit heavy, but I'll work it lightly. Remember, the harder you press, the deeper your paint's going to go. You just want to stroke it over the high spots. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. And do you see the black starting to fade and dissolve into the mountain? And the black is not so pronounced. It's picking up more of a shadow value, a void value in the rock. I like it. Okay, so I've been putting on the brown, and I come in with the black in the dark reliefs, as you've seen. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up another color with some kind of medium tone gray, and I'm going to again drag my brush, and I'm going to try to empty my brush out, because what I'm wanting to do is I just want to drag this to highlight. I don't want to bury the brown. I just want to really highlight my crevices with the brown by highlighting the tips with my gray. You see how I'm just gently pulling that on? And every time I go over it, I get a little more gray and a little more gray. I'm using gray because gray, oh, gray the ray. It's a natural kind of a rock color that we expect to see in stone and calcium and things like that. It's not taking a whole lot to cover this. So kind of what we're wanting to think about as we're doing this is picking up our values. Remember in art class, if you ever had an art class, you talked about a 9-point value scale that 1 was the lightest, 0 was the lightest, 9 was the darkest. And we're going to want to do that. This is a simple painting, so I'm not going to pull 9 values. If this was a complex painting, I may pull 20 or 30 values. And by that I mean going from a little darker brown to a little darker brown to a less darker brown to a lighter brown to a little lighter brown to more of a beige tan, and then a little bit of a darker gray to a lighter gray. You know, just keep building it out slowly and just keep highlighting here and there. And I'm already starting to dabble too much gray. But just remember, as this dries, the gray is going to be less apparent. But I'm just kind of going through there and just hitting the highlights. It doesn't take much to do this. So I'm only going to give this 5 different values, I guess. The base brown, the black, the beige, the sand, the warm tan, whatever color we want to call that. And now this gray. And now that the gray is going to dry, and when you're dry brushing, this light, it dries really remarkably fast. But just to keep that from smearing, I'm going to turn to the other side, which you see I've already done, and I'm going to pick up some more white. White's going to be the one, the highest, the brightest on our value scale, the lowest number. And we're not going to want to just get crazy with it. I've got too much on my brush. We're just going to want to catch with it. We're just going to want to catch lightly, because the white, man, it pulls it out. The white really picks up the highlights and pulls it out. Too much white, it's going to look like a snow-capped mountain. We're wanting to look like sun-bleached corners and edges on our stone, on our rock that's protruded through the mountainside. And I'm just touching this lightly, and it's just kind of a touch-up of what I've already done on the other side as I was working my dry brush techniques. Very minimal amount of white. And see how it just makes it pop? Now when we go in and do the landscape, we're going to add some greens and some browns, very subtle earth tone greens. We don't want to use a leprechaun Scottish bright green. We really want to watch that, because what will happen is it'll look like a neon sign. The values contrast too hard. And I'll show you more of that as we begin to do the landscape. See, this gray has already went on and set. So I may be rushing it just a bit, but I'm really just catching white on top of the gray that is dry brushed. I'm really not moving the gray around. The gray has, it's on so light, it just dried almost as fast as we put it on with the brush. And so will this white. Now just remember, we're wanting to catch the high points and some really cool ridges that the sun would be reflecting on, so to speak. Not trying to make it look snow crested. We're just really trying to pick up some of these fun textures and reliefs that we created with the wrinkles in the tissue paper. See how that just pulled right out? And I really like that. And if it's looking like a little bit too much white, it might be. If this is just going to be a solid surface stone tunnel, we might be a little bit heavy on white right now. But what's going to happen is, as we go in here and we lay some soil or some static, we have some static grass in the landscape, or some greenery or some moss or whatever, it's going to really pull the white down. It's going to really take that neon sign look away. So right now, the white is going to be our friend. It's really going to pick up and highlight the dark places. And you know, this is kind of one of those things, oh gosh, it looks good there, it looks good there. Got to do a little more, and you got to be careful. You got to back off. You got to know when to say enough is enough, right? Take your keys away, because enough is enough. We really want to get some on the top. And again, remember, we're going to hide a lot of this white. It's going to start disappearing when we start putting in scenery and landscape materials. When we put in the landscape materials in the next video, this is really going to look more like a dirt rock mountainside than just a big old clump of rock, dirt, and earth. Okay, I don't know how that looks to you, but that's kind of what we're doing. We're just lightly touching with the dry brush. You could have went from a medium gray to a light gray to a light white. You know, there's because you can see this popping. One color on top of another is just popping in contrast, which I like. This is a simple paint texture. It's a simple model scheme, but whenever we get into a more complicated paint schemes, I'll show you on another video, we may build slowly with 5 or 6 different values, building out from the dark to the light, and really give our mountainside some natural transitions that make it really look more like a natural stone or a natural earthen protrusion, boulder, tunnel, whatever it is that we're going to build. So I'll show you more of those. I hope this helps you get through the painting. We're going to get to the landscape video next, and then you're ready to run your trains. Thanks so much, and you know what? Best of luck, and try your dry brushing. You get better every time you practice.